Hello everybody and welcome to this time lapse. We've got some pink lilies here. The photo reference is by one of my patrons over on Patreon. I'll leave a link to some of her other work down below if you'd like to check it out. So I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm doing an underpainting with the still life. I haven't done that before with the still life. I have with landscapes, but I'm working on the Luxe archival paper here, and it's mounted on acid-free mount board, and the size is 8 inches by 10 inches. So what I'm using to block in the first layer and do the underpainting is Derwent pastel paints. The colors are pastel, but they're just normal paint pans, and they feel to me like a mixture, a bit like gouache, kind of like a mixture of watercolor gouache. They're just called paint pans. They don't really say whether it's a watercolor. Or I don't think they do anyway. But I'll leave a link in the description down below. But I chose these because I love the pastel colors, and I wanted to play around with a little bit more of a mixed media. So just going in with my background, you can see I've got a very loose sketch in there, and you can see I'm just mapping in very, very loosely. So my overall feeling for this was I wanted something that was looser, in a looser style, that wasn't so detailed as my other work. And when I want to work like that, I crack open a paint, or I'll use my pastels and some rubbing alcohol to create a sort of paint. For me, something about doing an underpainting equals the finished piece to be looser. I don't know what it is. It's just how my brain works. So now you can see I've laid in the basic shapes and color, and I've let it dry, and it takes quite quick. You know, within half an hour it was dry. So I was able to now go over with pastel. So in the background I'm working with a Rembrandt, and I used a mixture of grays. Oh, I'm just showing, that's the photo mount I used to actually glue on the paper to my support, you know, to my foam core. It's by 3M, I think it's called. Anyway, so you can see I've actually changed the reference photo slightly. I didn't include that bottom lily there on the left hand side. I just felt like it wasn't really necessary to add that in. But I definitely could have added some fallen petals or something on the table. I just find that gives it a lovely overall completeness to the painting. But I didn't actually do it for this one. So on the sanded paper, it's really easy, I find, to create mud. As soon as you get a few pastel layers, as in 2, I would say, that pastel pigment slips around everywhere. So I totally understand why lots of pastel artists who use a standard surface don't smear with their fingers. They just leave the stroke as it is. I understand that because it definitely can create mud very, very quickly. I usually work on pastel matte, and this is not the case. Like, I don't think I've ever created mud on pastel matte because that surface literally grips the pigment. And I just don't know what it is. It just doesn't make mud. So I love the surface. It's fun to work on, but it's definitely a bit different for me compared to the pastel matte. So another reason to choose a different surface from what I usually do is I'm wanting to create something looser, something a little bit out of my comfort zone, something, a style I don't usually paint in. And it's great to be able to use the tools to help you get there. Because if I'm painting on my normal paper, I'm going to go into normal drive of how I go about painting. So if I'm working on a different surface, it's forcing me to paint in a different way, you know? So that's another reason why I chose to use a surface that I don't use very often. Got to get my ruler out there because got to make sure that line is straight. Otherwise, your eyeball's going to be drawn to it, and definitely don't want that. So I used a mixture of these big blocks that you can see for a brief few seconds are Art Spectrum Extra Soft, the skin tones what's it called, skin tone set is amazeballs. It's got lovely like mauves, it's got lilac-y lavender colors, some pink and some like umber orangey colors. Really, really useful. So now just very, very quickly mapping in the glass vase. It's not going to stay like that because that looks really outlined and strange, but it's just for my brain to map out to see where it's going to go. And I just used a pastel pencil. As you can see on the background, I've got quite a few layers, but even that pastel pencil just goes over beautifully on the paper. So once you get a few layers, it also grips the pastel. But as I said, it is more prone to creating mud than the pastel mat, because it's almost like the pigment slips around and you can really mush the colors together, where pastel mat's a bit more sticky. I mean, it's not sticky as in the texture, but it just, I don't know, when you lay a pastel down, it just stays there. So my lily, the top lily here, is a lot fatter in real life than the reference photograph, but that's absolutely fine. Like, I'm not sticking to the reference perfectly. So that didn't bother me. I'm just going to make sure that I've got the right tonal values in there. Using a mixture of my pastel pencils, my Rembrandts. I used a few Senneliers and a few Blue Earth pastels in here too. Oh, and Giraud. I really love those Giroux. They're awesome. Great for getting your fine points, but they are soft. So as soon as you apply a bit of pressure, they break quite easily. So just got to be a bit careful. I'm actually sprayed a little bit of fixative there. It's a workable fixative by Daler-Rowney, and I love that one because it's such a fine mist. It actually doesn't change the color of the pastel at all. Now, if you go in with a heavy hand and really make the surface wet with that fixative, it will change it, make it darker. But if you just go in with the light mist, it actually doesn't even alter the pastel color at all. And I find that I can still, if you spray some fixative and then you put your finger on to test it, a bit of pastel will come off, but that's fine. Go in with another soft spray, and you build it up very softly, and then that pastel won't come off on your finger. So I really like that Daler-Rowney because it's such a fine mist. So as you can see, I'm using a mixture of pastel pencils as well as my sticks, some Carbothellos, some Caran d'Ache pencils. It's more about just the colors really than the textures of the different pastel pencils. Now I had to move. As you can see, I'm working on this petal of this lily, but I'm having to change it because the shape's all wonky and it's looking really funny, and it's really easy to change on this pastel paper. All I did was come in with more of the background and it completely covered up that pink, no problem. So it is quite easy to make adjustments to your pastel painting on this paper, the Luxe Archival. And it's fun. It feels amazing when you put that pastel onto the surface. It is really, really enjoyable. And I definitely will be using this paper a lot more. I've created 3 paintings on this paper. 2 landscapes, 4. 2 landscapes and 2 still lifes. Actually, I created some pink geraniums. If you just have a look at my videos, you can see a time lapse of those. And the intention was that to get a bit more detail and to use the paper a bit more like how I would with pastel mat. So I didn't do an underpainting. But this one, I really, as I said in the beginning, wanted to experiment more with my style and create something a little bit looser, a little bit more painterly. So that's why I went in with the pans, the painting pans. I actually need to see if they actually call them watercolor or gouache, but it's definitely somewhere in between, I'd say. So I chose this photo reference because I really liked the composition. I liked the triangular shape of this. I liked the lily on the top, and then with the few around just at the base, at the top of the vase. I just thought it made a really nice composition. I loved the color. I loved the gray back, the gray wall, and the pink. I think they make such a beautiful color combination, grays and pinks. So when I saw this photo reference, I was like, do you mind if I use this? And like I said, I think the lily down at the bottom should have been maybe directly on the table, because in the photo reference it just looks a bit strange. You can't kind of make out what's happening with that. That's why I chose to leave it out. You know, it's totally okay to not copy a photo exactly as what the photo is. You've got to copy it to make the painting work overall. That's really important. Otherwise, you know, it's just, it would look a bit odd. It wouldn't read properly. So here you can see I am using lots of different colors. These are the Rembrandts. They're the half sticks that I'm using. I find I don't have a lot of grays in my collection. The most grays I have are the unison grays, and I use those so much that I've run out of quite a lot of the colors. But I chose to give the Rembrandts because they're less expensive a go, and I really like Rembrandt. I think it's a great brand. So I'm using a mixture of the Giroux and mainly the Rembrandts for the glass. Now, when you're painting glass, it's really important that you get whatever's behind the glass in the glass. Otherwise, it's not going to look like glass, right? Because glass is see-through. So you can see I've got the table color. That's why in the beginning, I went straight over with the table all across the whole painting, and then painted the vase on top of that, so that the background would be left there. So you can see that browny mauvey color. So using some blue violets, grey blues, white. By this stage, the Giroux white usually is quite a nice potent white. But I found on this surface with a few other pastel layers underneath, it wasn't the brightest white I've ever used. I think the Sennelier and the Schminky are actually brighter. They're probably a little bit softer, so maybe that's why like the sanded surface grips them better. So yeah, there was no punchy white here. Just correcting the base, the shape, and I would say even now I needed to tweak the shape there on the left even more. It's got too much pastel pencil showing there. It looks a bit odd. So I would go back and change that. I would lose one of those edges so that it wasn't so stark. So this painting took me just over 2.5 hours to complete. And that's not bad going. If it was pastel matte, add another hour on there. And I went round with the Diane Townsend fluorescent pink just to give the lilies a little bit more zhuzh, if you know what I mean. Brighten them up a little bit. If you've enjoyed this, please do subscribe to the channel, and I shall see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.